I would say the biggest thing that I took from any of that stuff, whether it was the hands-on workshops or some of the anatomy pieces, was that whole idea of as firm as necessary but as gentle as possible. There's clearly more coming out that the gentler that we are in our techniques and the more time that we're giving to be able to do those techniques, the way more we're able to accomplish versus being harder and quicker.
Welcome to the Fascia-Informed Therapist podcast, designed for health and wellness practitioners interested in fascia science. I'm Amy Mayer, occupational therapist, practice owner, author, and educator with more than 30 years of experience using fascia techniques across many settings. Each episode brings practical insights and thought-provoking conversations to help you expand your skills and better serve your clients. Let's get started. Hi, this is Amy, and this is another edition of the Fascia-Informed Therapist, and today we're talking to Kaitlyn Rambo, post-Fascia Research Society conference. And when was that?
Beginning mid of August.
Okay, so she's had a couple weeks to think about it. She's going to hit some highlights for us. So you went a couple days early to check out New Orleans.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And how did you find New Orleans?
I mean, it was beautiful. There was definitely sections of the French Quarter that were definitely as you would picture, as you would see on Google Images. The best thing I thought about New Orleans was their public transportation was amazing. For most big cities I've been to, I was probably most impressed with their public transportation. The Garden District was where they had all of the beautiful mansions and the gardens and some of the old cemeteries. And that section was just beautiful. I could just spend all day walking around down there. But glad I went early so that I could see a couple things before the conference began.
Great. And move your hair just a little. There you go. Thank you. It's right over your microphone. It started on Sunday night?
Sunday night, okay. Yes.
All right.
Sunday night was the opening gala where they pretty much had Dr. Robert Schleep speak, and he was kind of the beginning keynote speaker. Okay. And he just spoke, about fascia in general, but just about kind of how and why he was one of the founding members to kind of start the Fascia Research Congress. And then after that, it was kind of just like a happy hour where people could go to one of the ballrooms and get drinks and kind of network and kind of meet who else was going to be there. And they also had their opening nights for their sponsors to have each of their booths there too that people could go check out.
Okay.
And so I would say I don't think everybody made it to the opening gala night, but there was I would say at least half, if not more, were there for that. And so that was really fun. And that's where I ran into Beth. Bocam, and out of New Zealand. That's where we saw each other and made the LinkedIn connection, a in-person connection.
Okay, cool.
So that was really fun, and that's kind of how it kicked off.
All right. Anything else interesting happen at the gala?
I really just met a lot of different people. That's kind of where I got the feel of who all was there. And I definitely met some physicians, some family medicine physicians, a lot of physiotherapists, some movement-based professionals like personal trainers, Pilates instructors, yoga instructors, a lot of massage therapists, a couple of PTs. I definitely think I was the only OT there in that room. And a couple of nurse practitioners that specialized in EDS and a couple of things like that. So yeah, it was really nice just to get to meet, kind of see what all the faces were there and what everybody's background was in that room. So yeah.
And did you tell me that you and Maddie, you found out eventually you guys were the only OTs at the conference?
Yeah, looking at the directory, we were the only two listed as occupational therapists. So, and there were definitely physical therapists there and physiotherapists there, but not a lot of the occupational therapists were represented there. So proud Maddie and I got to represent the OTs.
Okay. And you mentioned you met Beth from New Zealand. Did you meet anybody else from around the world other than, I know you met John Sharkey.
Yes, I met John Sharkey, talked to him for quite a while. I do have a picture with him. I'm very proud of that. And an autograph that actually looks like a shark. So pretty awesome about that.
So funny.
Did get to get a photo with Dr. Robert Schleep. And then I also got a photo with Andre Pilat. So those were a few of the, I would say, the big fashion names that I was like, I have to meet you, and can I please have a picture? They probably don't remember their interactions with me because they probably had hundreds of those interactions throughout the weekend. But they hold a special place in my heart. The nerdy side of me and the scientist side of me was definitely thankful that I let go of the fear to just go ask and introduce myself and have those conversations.
Yes, when I went in 2022, I felt very much like a fangirl, seeing some of these people that I've been reading their work for so long, and then you're in the elevator with Tom Myers. What's happening? Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's kind of weird to be fangirling researchers, but it is what it is. Okay, so hit some highlights for us.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the best parts for me were the keynote speakers every single morning. They kind of started each day with 2 or 3 keynote speakers, and then they had different kind of breakout sessions. So whether that was somebody else presenting research, or it was kind of a movement-based one, or a manual therapy-based one. One of the first ones I went to was Beth's Scar Tissue Techniques manual therapy one. That was one of the workshops, and really got to practice some of the light touch scar work out of that biotensegrity book that we both have. Okay. And that was just really cool because we got to break into groups, and even though there was a lot of people there that don't work directly one-on-one with clients and that don't do manual therapy work with their clients, they got to see what that would look like and why that piece is important, and how integrating that scar work is really not necessarily to address the external scar, but looking at what's the relationship of the scar internally and how is that affecting health and function that way. So I definitely liked how there were lots of people there from all different perspectives who attended that, even if they weren't necessarily looking to improve their scar work techniques, because they further understood what that referral source might look like and what they might do for their clients that they see.
Okay. And if you're not sure what book we're talking about, it's if you go to the Fascia-Informed therapist page, fasciainformed.com, there's a link to the book there.
One of the keynote speakers that stuck out the most for me was the one that Keith Barr did. He is a researcher out of California, and his presentation was pretty much based on how to train tendons, connective tissue, and fascia differently than how we train muscles and bones. And how when we have an injury, we often cast and or limit the mobility and take away the load off of said, connective tissue or limb or extremity. And he really went into how that changes the integrity of the tissue when we don't have load, even with an acute injury. And his research talked about, I want to say it was up to 3 days of immobility and or casting changes up to 20% of the integrity of the fascial tissues and connective tissues of that section.
Wow.
And so then when we start to reintegrate load, that load is going into the healthy pockets of connective tissue, not necessarily the newly formed unhealthy and healthy pockets of connective tissue.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so that that was the beginning 5 minutes, and so my brain was already exploding by that point. But I really liked how he differentiated what that load looks like, because there's that tensional load and that consistent compressive load, and how tendons have more of the ability to adapt when there's 10 minutes of that consistent load. But anything really beyond 10 minutes, you're kind of creating opportunity for wear and tear. And I feel like that, my brain took that as more of those movement snacks throughout the day, where we have intermittent sections of load on our tendons, on our tissues, and on our bodies, is going to be much more beneficial than if we did an hour and a half worth of load in one session per se.
So are you talking about, or was he talking about more of rehabilitation, that applies to rehabilitation, or healthy people, or both?
I would say probably both. Yeah, he didn't necessarily say one or the other, but how I took it was that it definitely could be applied to both situations.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, that presentation was amazing. For the anatomy nerd side of me, really liked the Gil Headley presentation. We couldn't take pictures of any of that because it was very cadaver based. But the piece that was really cool was, I had always thought that the vagus nerve was the same from the right and the left side. We know that the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve that goes from our brain down our neck and goes right through the middle of the diaphragm. But Gil Headley, his kind of mission was through cadaveric experience to show here's the whole line of innervation. Because in my cadaver experience, I remember being like, oh, this is it in this spot, and this is it in this spot, and this spot, but not to see the whole thing connected. And what he found was that not only do they function a little bit differently, but they are anatomically different on the right and the left side.
Interesting.
Versus how, like, what is innervated and how they lay within the body. And so I really appreciated that because, I mean, I guess I can appreciate another cadaver experience. And I would assume, just based on my conversations with a lot of people, there's a lot of people in that room that never had a cadaver experience unless they did that pre-conference workshop with John Sharkey or something else that they had done. And so for a lot of people, seeing what fascia looks like on the inside, even in a cadaver, was very new to them. And then to tie in that with one of the other presentations was the gentleman who is well known in the polyvagal theory, to tie those two pieces. Yes, yeah, Porges. And so to tie those two together, I thought was just really beneficial to really fully understand all of those components. A piece that definitely kind of got my brain wired up was in Carla Stecco's presentation when she was talking about lipedema. Is on one of her slides, I think I have a picture of it, but it literally talks about the physical and the social emotional components to how lipedema affects people and their health and their wellness. And a part of me was like, that is OT written on the wall.
Oh, yeah, way to go. Dr. Stecco, wow.
Yes.
Super cool.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, all right, keep going. This is good.
Yeah, I felt like in a lot of the people that I met, they asked, what's your perspective or what do you do? And I would say I'm an occupational therapist. And I think every single time, if they knew what occupational therapy was, they were like, oh, I had carpal tunnel and I worked with a hand therapist, or oh, I had trigger finger and I worked with a hand OT and blah, blah, blah. But they only thought that that's what OT was. And so that was kind of my opportunity to be like, yes, that is what OT does. That is what a hand OT does. I'm not a hand OT. This is the kind of OT that I'm involved in, and here's all the other ways that OT can also be involved. And so I felt like half of my brain was on the fascia nerdy, cadaver nerdy side of things, and the other half of me was also being an advocate with every single person that I met, because for each of those people, whether they were a Pilates instructor or a massage therapist or a family medicine practitioner, or like when I got to talk with John Sharkey, who's a clinical anatomist, they're all seeing that, oh, there are OTs paying attention to the science. There are OTs taking what we're saying and applying it clinically, not just in our private practice, but when I work at the hospital and when I was working at the skilled nursing facility and different pieces like that, because that pattern of people only knowing what OT is when they're exposed to the type, when they're in need of the type, definitely still holds true, even though we're in a room of professionals that do more than just fascia science. So,
well, way to go to be an advocate.
Thanks. I was on fire, so I was taking the opportunity and I was running with it.
Okay. So anything that you learned that you were able to take and apply right away?
Yes, I would definitely say with some of the scar tissue technique stuff in Beth's workshop was not only just different ways of applying the technique and honing in those skills, but for me, some of the pieces that really resonated with me was more of the assessment of scars and looking at how to document that assessment of scars and looking at the mobility and the blanching and all the different ways that we can assess a scar and its limitations externally to the body on top of posture and range of motion and different things like that, but as another way of going into the deeper levels with our clients about how the scar could be impacting their health and function. By taking, for example, one of the things we did was taking a north, south, east, west approach on a scar and saying, where's the point of limitations? Where does it feel stuck? You and I already do most of those things, but we don't necessarily go through and take the time to do, a 10-minute assessment of a scar and to document that, let alone do a retest, 3 sessions later.
Right.
And so I kind of thought that was a way to show like an outcomes measure of what we're doing with the scar and how that is impacting things internally based on what we can measure externally.
Sure.
So that was one of the pieces that I was like, we could definitely start doing that right away. And I also think that that conversation with our client can be a very active process, especially asking them like, what are they feeling? Because that really would tie into the proprioception, interoception piece of it.
What are they feeling when we're moving the scar?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What are they feeling that kind of like when you did some of the scar work on me, what was I feeling? Because that was definitely tapping into some of that for me, and also connected with me how much stuff I didn't really realize that my scar was probably impacting just because it looks okay on the outside.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that was one of the things. One of the other activities that I went to was a workshop where it was a biotensegrity workshop, which at first I was a little, I wasn't sure how I felt about it, because at first I was like, I feel like everybody here understands what biotensegrity is, which is why we're here to kind of take that next level deeper. But what was cool was that they had all these different biotensegrity models, and they were actually broken ones. So they had like a string that was cut, or a piece of it that wasn't fully connected. And so you could really kind of play with what words would you describe this non-functional movement that we're now able to observe based on this broken tensegrity model. And then as an activity with each of our small groups, we then fixed it and then kind of represented how like everything is very adaptable, and how even if not everything can be fixed, things can be changed with our environment to make us more functional.
Well, that sounds
daily
pretty
life.
OT as well.
Yeah, right? It was really fun. It really was cool. I mean, and one of the things we did too was they had these almost like a very circular, not quite a sheet in a way, but kind of. And we each kind of like put our bodies inside of it, and we connected the whole group together and kind of moved as a group, which at first I was like, somebody's going to get hurt if we really do this. But I did think that it was kind of a way to wrap up the whole concept together. But at first I was like, what are we doing?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I might have saw a picture of that somewhere. Did you take a picture of that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. What else do you want to tell us?
Jill Miller, I went to hers, and she talked about the diaphragm a lot in her presentation. Her presentation was not only kind of reinforcing a lot of what she talks about in the Body by Breath book, but also here's the way that she uses her like tune-up fitness balls, to kind of target the diaphragm and to engage in that diaphragmatic breathing. And some of that I definitely thought we could definitely integrate into the breast and chest self-treatment class.
Okay.
Because we do a lot around the diaphragm with that, but it just gives you more ideas of different ways to use similar tools in a different way. So I have her Body by Breath book, but that thing is a monster. So slowly working my way through it.
It is a big one, yep. It's a good one, though. It's a very good one.
Yes. Some of the other ones, a lot of people, there were definitely some presentations that were about imaging fascia and looking at that ultrasound component of looking at the differences in density, or where there's pockets where it's clearly denser and thicker and not having that smooth glided movement. And so some of those pictures are hard to describe verbally, but they were really, really cool. Just to see that difference, and here's what the tissues could look like on the inside, depending on your issue.
Do you think, based on what you heard and learned, that we're any closer to getting that kind of information in the hand of clinicians or physicians who might diagnose a fascial problem? Are we still...
I think we're still pretty far.
Many years away from that.
Yeah, I think we're still pretty far. A couple people talked about thermography and looking at that too. One of the interesting conversations that I had with John Sharkey was about a different kind of cadaver that's kind of starting to come out that will kind of show that ground substance and that bound water in the body as something that can still be circulated through in a cadaver, not necessarily a living person.
What?
Yes, and it's a new kind of cadaver that they're utilizing to kind of look at, can we see the circulation as a stimulated circulation with them being a cadaver in a way. And
okay, you're blowing my mind right now.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And so especially in the workshop that what water looks like, because I feel like people have this free-floating image in their mind and then the cadaver picture in their mind, so to kind of blend those together is definitely what this picture showed. And so some of those images are available in Pilates textbooks and stuff that I know that you have. But yeah, that was a big highlight, just to see how just him pointing out that reflection piece on top of seeing how just that very light physical stimuli changed that whole ground substance underneath. Even though you weren't pushing very hard, you really were impacting way beyond the layers. Way beyond.
Okay, so I know the anatomy nerd in you loves that.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on how that translates to how you think about your own body or bodies that are functional or influence your practice or anything? This episode of the Fascia-Informed Therapist is brought to you by me. I offer Fascia-Informed CE for health and wellness practitioners both online and in person. Whether you're looking for flexible self-paced courses or hands-on in-person workshops, you'll find evidence-based practical tools you can apply right away in your practice. Visit fasciainformed.com to explore upcoming offerings and take your next step as a fascia-informed therapist.
I would say the biggest thing that I took from any of that stuff, whether it was the hands-on workshops or some of the anatomy pieces, was that whole idea of as firm as necessary but as gentle as possible. There's really more coming out that the gentler that we are in our techniques and the more time that we're giving to be able to do those techniques, the way more we're able to accomplish versus being harder and quicker. So I would say it definitely just reinforced that we don't need to be hard and quick and fast with the tissues to have a result that lasts long term. And if we're going to do things in a way that isn't going to be destructive, being more on the gentle side is going to do more to retrain the tissues versus provide immediately quick, short-lasting relief. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the question that I know you talked to John Sharkey about a little bit, or maybe they talked about this in the session that they did together. And did we recently have this conversation about release versus induction?
Yes.
Was that you?
Yes.
Okay, so did they talk about the difference between using the term release versus induction?
Yes. So I would say across the board in all presentations, 95% of the presentations I went to used the term myofascial induction. And myofascial induction was the term used to describe any kind of manual therapy modality to target the myofascial system and to target fascia.
And why?
And the reason, at least in my conversation with John Sharkey, was using the term myofascial induction made things more broad so that they are able to research those various types of techniques without being necessarily pigeonholed into what does release mean. And I'm air quoting for those that can't see me on camera. But myofascial release is what the public knows most often. It's not the only manual therapy modality that targets fascia. The more that we learn about fascia, the more that we've learned we can't really touch the body without affecting fascia in some way, right? But myofascial release is what the public Googles. It's what people look for. It's what people hear about on social media. And so, which is why ourselves, and I'm going to guess other clinicians, continue to use that term. But as far as what is described in the literature, what was described between the researchers, what was presented, everything was referred to as myofascial induction. Because even in my conversation with John Sharkey, when I told him, oh yeah, I specialize in myofascial release, he was like, oh, myofascial induction? Like, what do you mean by release? And I was like, yes, I hear what you're saying. I'm giving you my public answer,
Yes.
not the professional answer, right? So that was definitely a part of the conversation throughout.
Okay. I'm curious to see if there'll be a shift in the literature of using, because a lot of the literature up until now more so says release. If they're including that as a part of a study or something that they're looking at its effectiveness, for example. But I bet there's going to be a shift. And I definitely talk about that in the book that is now done. And talk about the article, believe it was Leon Chaitow that talked about the difference between the two and why the induction was a better choice because we're trying to induce a change,
Yes.
as opposed to release something.
Yes, or
that
break
is-
up.
that is stuck.
Yeah.
Because it may not be stuck. It could be a lot of things. Anyway, okay, that's interesting. All right, so anything else?
I mean, there's a lot.
We could be here a while.
Yes.
Okay, would you go again?
I think so, yeah. I think I would want to see who the keynote speakers are. I was kind of bummed because Neil Ties, I forget where he's out of, he did not end up making it to the Congress.
I think it's Thies.
Thies. Yeah.
I think so.
And so I was lucky that when I attended the virtual British Fascia Symposium back last summer that I got to hear him speak there. I don't know if his presentation was going to be different at this one or not, but sadly he wasn't able to make it last minute. They did have an amazing replacement keynote speaker who is an anesthesiologist. But yeah, so that was, I would say, depending on who the keynote speakers were, I would definitely go again. And I guess depending on where in the world it's going to be next. They hinted at that there will be another one. They just did not hint at where it will be.
Okay.
So.
Well, hopefully someplace cool we can go to.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so people who are listening to this podcast are obviously people who are interested in fascia and fascia science. Who would you recommend attend the Fascia Congress, or would you, or what should they consider in their decision-making process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would love to see more OTs there. I mean, as a doctorally trained OT, research and disseminating research is a huge component of not us obtaining our doctorate in occupational therapy, but also as a part of, I would say, our mission of always staying evidence-based and always looking at the evidence and looking at this is what the research is saying. How am I interpreting this as an OT and then taking it into my practice? I would say anybody that works with breast cancer clients or breast cancer survivors in that recovery, there's a huge piece about radiation fibrosis and just how fascia continues to change over time. That's a huge population that I see OTs helping with and understanding the science behind fascia, I think aids people in their, I would say, in their therapeutic process when working with clients. I would love to see more lymphedema OTs there too. There was a big conversation about lymphatics in many different presentations. And I don't think that there's too much information that we could have to better aid and guide our practice and with our clients. So yeah, and anybody in the ortho world too, I would say those are big home hitters that definitely need to pay attention to the science because, like I said, in most of those presentations, they talk about the functionality piece. I mean, I think the word function was in, I don't know how many of those presentations, and that's our bread and butter as OTs. And the more that we're able to use our higher education to further understand this is what the latest and greatest is saying, how does this change what I'm going to do with my clients in my outpatient practice setting, in my inpatient practice setting, I think that's going to really change the game and really kind of show people that OTs have a spot in the world that they're looking for referral sources, because there's a couple conversations that I overheard people being like, oh yeah, I love doing stuff with movement and I love doing stuff with biomechanics, but I don't know anything about tying in the social emotional piece of it. And a part of me wanted to butt in and be like, me, I do. I'm an OT. OTs do.
OTs do.
Call OTs.
Yeah.
And I think that also shows the public that the public can see that OTs are seeking information out, so that people have someone that they can go to ask those questions. And so that's who I would say.
Okay, great. Anything else before we wrap?
I don't think so. If anybody wants to call me and talk about it more, please do.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your experience at the Fascia Research Congress of 2025 in New Orleans. And we'll be hearing from Maddie and her experience in the next episode.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You've been listening to the Fascia-Informed Therapist podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes. And if you'd like to go deeper, check out my continuing education courses, both online and in person. You can find them at fascia-informed.com. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to next time.